What if I told you that Aokiji had the power to cryogenically preserve the dead? Aokiji Kuzan is a character who is directly connected to not one, not two, but 3 Will-of-D members. With the mystery surrounding Aokiji's character, it's clear to me that Oda has huge plans for this former admiral. This video will connect Wano, Brook, Mariah, Punk Hazard, the Reverie, and most importantly, Aokiji Kuzan himself and the Hie Hie No Mi, so sit back and relax as we dive into the man of lazy justice himself, Aokiji. First, let's start off with the inspiration for this theory, cryogenics and cryonics, and I spent hours researching these topics for this video, and all I can say is reality can be so much crazier than fiction. Cryogenics is a scientific study of all living things at low temperatures. Cryonics is a preservation of dead bodies with the hope that one day they can be reanimated or brought back to life. 2 very different things, but they are oftentimes confused to be the same, and that is mostly just due to sci-fi interpretations of the two. In 1962, a physics professor named Robert Ettinger wrote a book titled The Prospect of Immortality. This book went on to inspire groups like the Immortalist Society and the Cryonics Institute, and it was all based on the idea that the way to achieve immortality would be by freezing and preserving your body for the future when immortality will be possible. Terms like cryosleep began even before then, when a book in 1957 titled A Door into the Summer by Robert Heinlein gave us the idea of a body being deanimated and reanimated in the future. And forward to the future, there are multiple cryonics facilities with hundreds of bodies frozen and waiting for the possibility that one day they will be brought back from the dead. So with that, let's bring it all back to One Piece. So let's start off with Aokiji, the former admiral and the Iceman himself. The Hie Hie No Mi plays such a big part in this theory. The capability of the Devil Fruit is ridiculous when you especially consider that this series is based around pirates and marines. So an admiral who can freeze the water and manipulate the water into ice and entire oceans is insanely useful in combat. Besides ice and laziness, another theme surrounding Aokiji is time. There are 3 main attacks with time-based names: Ice Time Capsule, and Ice Age. Ice Time freezes the opponent but keeps him in a suspended state. We saw this with Nico Robin and Jozu, who had his arm destroyed and never got it back. Ice Time Capsule is an attack that Aokiji used against his friend Jaguar v.II. And we don't know much about this attack, but a time capsule is a container that preserves objects for a later date. So an Ice Time Capsule sounds very similar to a cryogenic freezing facility. Check out my previous videos where I speculate on the idea that Jaguar v.II could possibly still be alive. And now finally we have Ice Age, easily one of Aokiji's most powerful abilities, and we saw him freeze over entire oceans and even Whitebeard's powerful tsunamis. So if we take an awakened Hie Hie No Mi user, could it be possible to create a cryogenic freezer, or possible to even freeze an entire land and create a cryogenic land frozen in ice? We all know about the prophecies and the return of Joyboy being near, but that leads me to Punk Hazard and Ringo. Punk Hazard is the only place we have seen Aokiji in a post-time skip, where the legendary 10-day battle against Akainu was set to take place, and this island is the most important place for this character that we know of. That was supposedly created by Akainu and Aokiji, and I want to remind you of a specific scene where we see frozen giants. We hear that they are even bigger than the average giant. Where are these giants cryogenically frozen? Possibly a reference to Saul. And there's also the Yeti crew brothers, who seem to have a straw hat, members of a mysterious type of giant, and we never seen their face. So is it possible that the Yeti crew brothers could be connected to the giants that Saul was from? And remember that this was a place that they were researching and experimenting on gigantification, so the fact that we never seen their face is extremely suspicious. There was a Yeti brother who had the same name as one of Kaido's crew members, Scotch. And speaking of Kaido, that leads me to Wano. According to what we know about Aokiji and Akainu's duel on Punk Hazard, it should have been possible to create the entire island made out of ice or magma, and I believe that Ringo was created in the past by a former Hie Hie No Mi user. Ringo is a cold climate region of Wano, and we learn from Kawamatsu that Ringo is the home to the eternal grave, a place where samurai bodies are put when they die, and is so cold that their bodies are preserved without decomposing. Echo Moria, in a way, had his own eternal grave with the zombie graveyard, and I think this is very interesting because, as I explained with the cryogenics, Ringo could be the ultimate cryogenic facility, and Gecko Moria is a character who also had his own cryogenic freezer where he keeps Oars, and I believe that this room was also created by an awakened Hie Hie No Mi user as well, and we'll get to why I believe that. Gecko Mordia had clashed with Kaido, and it's assumed that Mirai took Ryuma and Shisui during his time in Wano. So the body of a man who was preserved. The era of the Golden Wano was said to have been centuries before the current era. So this idea that Ringo could preserve dead bodies for centuries is a fact. And now this is just a side note, but I think it would be absolutely hilarious if Kaido allowed Moraya to take Ryuma and Shisui out of paranoia from hearing the rumors of this preserved dragon slaying legend. Calm also explains how the bodies are preserved, but also let's not forget about the katanas. The katanas are essential for the samurai, and they carry on the will of the previous user by being passed on to the future generations. Similarities between Ringo and Thriller Bark include Ryuma, the zombies, the cemeteries, and the cryogenic freezing. With the recent chapters where Hiyori influences Emma to give Zoro a massive power up, it seems like we could be heading in the direction of souls being trapped in the katanas, and we already know they have personalities, but where do those come from? There's also the idea that Queen has made viruses that include mummies and eyes onis. Mummies, which is a reference to Ringo, and eyes oni could be a reference to Thriller Bark, with Oars, who was a frozen giant oni. Is it possible that Oars is also from Ringo? We know that there was a giant Oars head, which is Onigashima, but where did Moraya get a preserved Oars body that was said to have died so many years ago? And now moving on from Ringo and Punk Hazard, let's get on to Reverie. Reverie was a very mysterious event, and what I want to focus on here is the freezer. You should go check out the Oars Is Joyboy video that explains the many similarities between Reverie and Thriller Bark. The real question is, where did Thriller Bark come from? Brook says it came from the West Blue, but then why does it also have a similar freezer to such an important place, the Reverie and Mary Joy's? And since we know that Mirai was able to cryogenically freeze Oars, it could be possible that Im had Joyboy's original body cryogenically preserved, and we've seen the Straw Hat, so that could also hint at Joyboy's body being there. And as I've shown multiple times in One Piece, we've seen where there is snow and ice and freezers, you have to assume that there is a body. And if it's not Joyboy, what other bodies could be frozen in the freezer in Mary Joy's? Could it be an ancient giant, an ice oni, maybe Goldie Roger? I'm not exactly sure, but I am confident that this freezer does contain a body, or at the very least, it could have been where Im was being preserved for the longest time. Im may be cryogenically preserving his own body in this freezer and allowing him to survive or become immortal. And since we are nearing the time of prophecy, could it be that Im has finally reawakened from his hibernation? Let me know what you think about the freezer in Mary Joy's. Does it have a connection to Thriller Bark's freezer? And I truly believe that both freezers were created in the past by a former Hie Hie No Mi user. But finally, one more character that is essential to this discussion is Brook. There are many theories about Brook and Aokiji somehow being related. That's not what I'm here to speak on, but their similarities could be important to this theory. Remember that Oda did decide to put Brook's shadow in Ryuma's corpse, and Brook does also have seemingly unexplained ice abilities. Brook's existence proves that souls may leave a body once you die, and Brook quite literally reanimated his dead skeleton. So if souls do exist, it could add to the explanation of Samurai's soul being in a katana waiting for the user to be reanimated. And now let's move on to all of the attacks that he unlocked post time skip. Now I'm definitely going to mess up these names, but stick with me. First of all, we have Kasuryuta Fubuki Giri, which means blizzard slash. Next we have Eka Kyuta Itoyogiri, which is the 3 quick freezing cuts. Soul Parade, which is a counter freezing attack. Swallow Banderole, which is an attack that freezes the ground, but more importantly is a vertical slash that freezes the opponent. Then we have Cold Soul, which is Brook deanimating his body and then passes his soul through someone's body, which results in them freezing. Freeze the Arms Orchestra, which is just where Brook creates an attack and a slash and freezes his opponents. So are Brook's ice abilities a reference to cryogenic freezing and reanimation? I don't think it's a coincidence that the only character to be revived and reanimated also unlocked an entire moveset worth of ice attacks when he mastered his soul powers. And on top of that, he uses his sword in most of these ice techniques. So again, bringing it all back to Ringo and Aokiji and the cryogenic freezing. But I think you get the overall point. His abilities are linked to freezing things. He can also reanimate and deanimate his own body. Maybe with the combined power of Brook and Aokiji, the entire land of Ringo and the samurai will be able to be reanimated one day. But now let's talk about one relationship, which is Aokiji and Blackbeard. Aokiji is connected to 3 Will of D members, Jaguar, which I briefly spoke of earlier, but I also made an entire video on, go check it out. Saul was his former friend from the Marines. Next we have Monkey D. Garp, who is someone Aokiji has always looked up to, aspired to be like, and he owes a great favor. And now Blackbeard, or Marshall D. Teach. So I think it's possible that Aokiji has the will of D because he is connected to many of these characters. But when it comes to Blackbeard, he's a character that we know little about, but we do know that he is a big devil fruit enthusiast, a fanatic. I would say he even has an obsession with devil fruits. We already know that he has 2 insanely overpowered devil fruits, which we don't even know how he did. He is a giant who has become even more giant, a psychopathic murderer who can become invisible, a bloodthirsty woman who can shapeshift and become a mythical nine-tailed fox. And when Blackbeard's crew is questioning the suspicion of Aokiji, Blackbeard does not seem to be worried at all. And if Aokiji's devil fruit is as important as I'm saying it is, even having possible connections to eMDee and Oars is understandable why Blackbeard might be excited to team up with the former admiral. Maybe Blackbeard knows the true power of the Hie Hie No Mi and what it could be worth in the future. And now with Mirai being in a possible alliance with Blackbeard and Aokiji, this could be a team up that takes over Ringo and has an entire army of zombie samurai. We know there are centuries worth of bodies there, and this is the perfect opportunity to make Mirai relevant once again. But anyways guys, what do you think about this theory? Does Aokiji have the will of D? Does the Hie Hie No Mi have the power of cryogenically freezing an entire island on this wide of a scale? Was Mirai and eMDee's freezers created by Aokiji or a previous Hie Hie No Mi user? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like button, don't forget to subscribe, and have a great day.